Project Apollo, Cape Kennedy, Florida. Objective: hurl 45 tons of men and equipment to a point 250,000 miles away and return the 3 astronauts safely to Earth. This dress rehearsal for a round trip to the moon is part of a national commitment to the peaceful exploration of space. It is a $20 billion investment in the world of tomorrow. By 1970, when the objective is reached, we will have a firm foothold on the future, the seeds of a deep space capability. But Apollo is not an end in itself. It is a beginning. Our total effort is the most intricate mobilization of government, industry, and science in history. It is not necessarily geared to the fascination and excitement that have accompanied Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, but aimed at an era when space travel is as common as air travel. An era when intercontinental ballistic airliners go to and from spaceports all over Earth, and rocket fleets bring back the wonders of the universe as a matter of routine.
Seconds and holding momentarily.
The day is not as distant as it seems. NASA and the Department of Defense are already turning the theory into reality.
Ignition.
This is the basic concept that will someday fulfill the dream. Total maneuverability, outside of and within the atmosphere. The capability to launch, maneuver in orbit, withstand re-entry, and then maneuver inside the atmosphere so that a landing can be made at will. It is a concept that is being refined by today's research astronauts, men in space who risk their lives in prototype vehicles to determine the requirements of tomorrow. When compared to the heralded men of Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, they are not well known. With rare exceptions, their past efforts have been confined to the scientific journals of space. But the world of tomorrow is within reach, and the chronicle of their success is about to explode on the front page of history. This is the United States Air Force Titan III complex at Cape Kennedy, Florida. In effect, the Titan III launch system is to the Department of Defense what the Saturn Apollo launch system is to NASA. It supplies a versatile launch capability for support of future space programs. Described as a common carrier for space, it can accommodate a wide variety of military payloads, including spacecraft in conical, lifting body, or winged shapes. The launch vehicles are no longer assembled on the pad as they were during Mercury and Gemini. They are built up in stages, transferred to the pad, and then launched. This is called the Integrate Transfer Launch Procedure and is the key to Titan's economy of operation. Colonel Mark Ducote, Division Chief, Titan III Launch Operations.
Now, from the launch window, which is approximately 180 feet in the air in the vertical integration building of the Titan III launch system. I use system because Titan III is not just a flight bird, as you see here, but it is an entire system designed for space. This is a Titan IIIC space launch vehicle, which is an adaptation of the Titan II ballistic missile. It also is similar to the Gemini launch vehicle. To the basic two-stage Titan II, we have added yet a third stage, or the trans stage. We also have added on either side 120-inch diameter solid rocket motors, which individually produce nearly 1.25 million pounds of thrust. We put together the parts of the liquid core vehicle in the building in which I'm housed now, the vertical integration building. This is done vertically. The stages and the subsystems are checked out completely, and when ready, they are withdrawn from this building on a large rail transporter by locomotives and transported to the solid motor assembly building. In that building, simultaneous with the checkout of the core, we have been putting together these huge solid rocket motors, each of which weighs in excess of 250 tons. These motors are assembled in the vertical. They are completely checked out. And when we bring the transporter and the mobile launcher into the solid motor assembly building by the rail system, these are lifted into position, as you see them here, side by side to the core, and mechanically and electrically mated. After this has been accomplished, then they are moved on out to the launch complex, and you see that over my left shoulder, or in this direction, and the vehicle is put into position for launch on the complex. Following a series of integrated checkouts in which the total system is checked and the vehicle is fueled, we are in a position to go ahead and initiate our launch.
Fuel and LOX control.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
All launch commit lights are green.
T-minus 10 seconds.
The first manned mission that will utilize Titan III is the United States Air Force Manned Orbiting Laboratory, a program designed to evaluate man's performance in space over extended periods of time.
Ignition.
The Manned Orbiting Laboratory is one of the nation's most advanced research concepts. But initially, it will require the use of a Gemini-type capsule for astronaut transportation to and from orbit. Capsule transportation is acceptable for the immediate future, but as space activity increases, there are a variety of reasons why it will become both unwieldy and expensive. The brilliant success of Project Gemini was marked by the astronauts' ability to maneuver orbiting space capsules. This ability was the key to rendezvous and docking in space, an essential element of Project Apollo lunar flights. By comparison, the lack of maneuverability during capsule re-entry seems primitive. The method is simple, but the astronaut has no flexibility, and an ocean landing is mandatory. This requires an extremely expensive commitment of naval forces, which must remain in recovery areas throughout all manned space missions. Time was an important factor during Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, and parachute recovery was selected because its technology offered the path of least resistance. However, if we are to extend space activities in the future, a more versatile and far less expensive system must be found. The answer is maneuvering re-entry and recovery on land, and it looms ahead as one of the major breakthroughs in the brief history of man in space. In stark contrast to prime recovery areas on the high seas, the solution to maneuverable re-entry is filtering back from a barren desert located 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles, California. site is Rogers Dry Lake, home of Edwards Air Force Base and the NASA Flight Research Center. NASA began the quest to replace parachute recovery some time ago. The man who conducted test operations was an ex-Navy fighter pilot and veteran of the X-15 program, NASA research pilot Milt Thompson.
One of the recovery systems proposed to replace the parachute was a paraglider. This is a wing that was developed by a NASA research scientist by the name of Rugello. It's a very simple triangular shape similar to the paper airplanes that people have made during their school day. And Neil Armstrong and I became quite interested in paraglider concept and actually proposed that we build one and try and fly it. We did build the vehicle in-house in our own shops and with our own materials, and as you can see, the construction was quite simple, and it was primarily based on safety considerations to protect the pilot in case of an accident. Our paraglider demonstrated to us that the pilot could maneuver it and flare and land it. We did, however, find a number of disadvantages to this type of system. It is very susceptible to turbulence, and it's quite possible that in rough air or high winds you may not land on the normal gear system. You may land on your side or even on your nose. The objective was to use this wing in place of the parachute to enable the capsule to be recovered on land. The test program on the full-scale paraglider was not too successful in the early phases, and since time was a very important factor in the Gemini program, they decided to go back to the conventional parachute recovery system.
The failure of the paraglider as a recovery system brought back a theory conceived in the early 1950s. A split wingless cone which was half airplane, half spacecraft. The vehicle resembled a flying wedge, but had the aerodynamic properties of a wing. Theoretically, it could be rocketed into space like a Gemini or Apollo capsule, and then maneuvered to a landing like a jet fighter without power. Extensive wind tunnel data was available, but no such vehicle had ever been flown, and there were grave doubts regarding whether or not it could be controlled by a pilot in the cockpit. In spite of this, Thompson and a group of research pilots saw possibilities in the concept and went ahead. They selected what is known as the M2 shape and contracted a sailplane company to build the hull.
It was constructed of very thin plywood. The internal structure was a welded steel tube structure similar to what you might find in light aircraft. This program was done pretty much on our own without funding from NASA headquarters. The construction costs were approximately $20,000. We started out very cautiously by towing the vehicle with a special tow car and made quite a number of flights at low altitude or within, say, 5 feet of the ground. These flights were quite successful. I call them flights. They would last possibly a minute and a half as we went steaming across the lake bed at speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour. And as a result of this, we went on to an air tow. If we can prove that pilots can actually land the vehicle as he would a conventional aircraft, you eliminate the necessity for a large recovery force in the primary recovery area and additional recovery forces at various locations around the Earth, which may be required in emergencies. So there could be a tremendous saving of money and manpower.
10 seconds now.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. Okay, roger.
A lifting body derives its lift from the body shape alone, and of course the aerodynamics are similar to that which you have with the wing, in that you have higher pressures on the bottom than you do on the top surface of the shape. This then provides a sufficient amount of lift to actually glide unpowered, and during the glide you can maneuver and control the vehicle. I think probably the only surprises that we did encounter were the response to turbulence. A conventional airplane tends to dip a wing, or a wing come up on you as you encounter turbulence. There is a very rapid roll-off requiring a recovery to level flight.
In a series of dramatic flights, and to the amazement of onlookers, Thompson proved his plywood flat iron would fly. The test continued with rocket-assisted landings, and a 2.5-ton heavyweight model of the M2 shape was ordered. Thompson checked out 7 more Air Force and NASA research pilots, like Bruce Peterson, and speculated the future possibilities.
See, your drivers got in.
Yeah, they're getting ready to go. We got airplanes on the flyby line this morning. We'll have to watch out for those.
Yeah. Eventually, lifting bodies may replace the familiar capsules on top of boosters
It'll be a warm one today, doesn't it?
as space vehicles. For near-Earth missions, how many are you going to try and get when you
Well, as many as I can get before we have to chase X-15.
Yeah. What time are they going to take off? 9?
9 o'clock, yeah.
Are you going to land on the runway or on the compass rose?
Ready?
As most people are aware, there are a number of programs that have been proposed which involve orbiting laboratories, orbiting space stations. These would be put into orbit and would remain in orbit for several years, possibly indefinitely. To man these stations, of course, would require rotation of personnel. You can't put people up and leave them there for 10 years and let them come down with a space station.
Okay, Bob, I'll plug in your biomedical package here.
Very well. You can, when you get through the rollout, Bruce, you can pull the plug off.
Yeah, I will.
We've got another recorder around, so how many flights are you going to make?
As many as I can up till 9 o'clock.
Looks like you'll be good.
How about holding this?
Got it. Have you noticed that somebody got away with the bottom part of your mask?
Pardon?
Have you noticed somebody got away with the bottom part of your mask?
Up here.
Well, the releaser said,
I can get it right here.
you're all set.
Okay, get on this side, man.
Over here.
A possible use for lifting bodies would be to serve as a resupply vehicle to transport personnel to the space station, transport cargo, and then return the personnel and or any equipment back from the space station to Earth.
Okay, let's check the room, Bob.
When you get off, you're right behind the wake of your engines on your goon, and you're catching a lot of turbulence right there, and you'll catch a lot of buck right there. Right, Chief?
Yeah, it's a pretty stiff place to run. That's why he gets up off before the goon even gets on.
Rick, do you want to crank up my radio volume? 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, how's this? A little more. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1.
Switch is on and my guard is off. Is up on the rocket power switch.
Okay. Okay, we got a flare out. You got it in right.
Oh, I can't see it. I see it now.
Okay, and we're right next to it.
Now I got you inside. They're about 2.5, almost 3 miles.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm about to land a little short again, guys.
Yeah.
Going right down the runway. Okay.
I think the thing that, of course, is most impressive about these vehicles, or flying these vehicles, is the steep descents. Lifting bodies, of course, are optimized performance-wise for the high-altitude conditions right after reentry, and as a result, their transonic and subsonic or low-speed performance is not what you'd call good. It certainly doesn't compare to a light aircraft, even with the engine off.
The successful checkout of Peterson and the 7 other pilots continued to prove the concept was valid. In the summer of 1966, the heavyweight vehicle was delivered, and Thompson began final preparations for the acid test.